The auctioneer's gavel cracked down like a gunshot, and the crowd erupted into laughter as Margaret Ellison raised her hand for the ugliest, most forgotten object in the entire estate sale, a welded-shut, rust-eaten chest that nobody else wanted, not even for scrap. Under the blazing afternoon sun, with folding chairs creaking and dust rising off the gravel lot, she paid $100 for a piece of junk that the entire town would later say changed her life forever, though in that moment, all she felt was the heat of 200 eyes and the sting of quiet ridicule. If you believe in kindness and second chances, and in the idea that the things people throw away can hold the most meaning, hit like on this video, drop a comment below, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Whispering Tales Stories so you never miss a story like this one. Margaret was 34 years old and had spent the last 6 years rebuilding her life from nothing. Her marriage had ended in a courtroom that smelled like stale coffee and broken promises, and she had walked out with little more than her name, her old sedan, and a stubborn refusal to let bitterness become her permanent address. She worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices before dawn and waiting tables until well past dark. And on weekends, when her body ached and her bank account whispered warnings, she wandered through estate sales, not because she had money to spend, but because she loved imagining the lives that had once filled those houses. Old teacups told stories of quiet mornings. Faded photographs held decades of laughter. She found comfort in objects other people had discarded. Perhaps because she understood more than most what it felt like to be treated as something no longer worth keeping. The estate belonged to a reclusive widower named Walter Higgins, a man the town had regarded with a mixture of curiosity and dismissal for as long as anyone could remember. He had lived alone at the edge of town in a house with peeling paint and overgrown hedges, rarely speaking to his neighbors, rarely leaving except to buy groceries or sit on a bench by the river, staring at the water as though searching for something he had lost long ago. When he passed away quietly in his sleep, no children came forward. No distant relatives arrived with tears or claims, and the county simply liquidated what remained of his life to the highest bidders on a hot Saturday afternoon in June. Most of the items were unremarkable. Chipped dishware, a lawnmower missing a wheel, boxes of yellowed newspapers nobody bothered to open. But near the back of the garage, half hidden beneath a moth-eaten tarp, sat the chest. It was heavy, iron-banded, and sealed shut with rust so thick it looked as though the metal itself had grown scar tissue over the decades. The lock had fused into the latch entirely, and when the auctioneer's assistant tried to pry it open for inspection, he gave up after a few embarrassed grunts and simply shrugged at the crowd. "Sold as is," he called out, half laughing. "Good luck getting into this old thing." Nobody wanted it. A man in the front row joked that it probably held Walter's unpaid taxes. Someone else said it was likely full of rocks, ballast for a boat that no longer existed. But Margaret found herself staring at the chest with an odd, quiet ache in her chest, the same ache she felt whenever she encountered something that had been dismissed too quickly. She thought of her own life, of the months after her divorce when people looked at her with pity, when she had felt just as sealed shut, just as impossible to open, just as easy to laugh off. When the auctioneer called for bids and silence answered him, she raised her hand and said, $100, and the laughter that followed felt less like cruelty and more like disbelief that anyone could care about something so broken. She wrestled the chest into the trunk of her car with the help of a stranger who took pity on her, and she drove home replaying the laughter in her mind, wondering, not for the first time, if she had made another foolish decision in a life that already felt full of them. Her apartment was small, the kind of small that made every purchase feel like a negotiation with the walls themselves, and the chest sat in her living room for 3 days while she worked her shifts, exhausted, barely glancing at it except to wonder what she had been thinking. On the 4th evening, unable to sleep, she knelt beside it with a hammer, a screwdriver, and a stubbornness that had gotten her through worse. It took nearly 2 hours of careful, patient work, chipping away rust flake by flake, before the latch finally gave way with a groan that echoed through her quiet apartment like a held breath finally released. She lifted the lid and the smell of old cedar and older paper rose up to meet her, and for a moment she simply knelt there, staring, because what she found inside was not rocks and it was not junk, and it was nothing anyone at that auction could have imagined. Wrapped in yellowed cloth were dozens of letters, their ink faded but legible, alongside a small leather journal, several black and white photographs, and a modest velvet pouch containing a woman's wedding ring, delicate and simple, the kind of ring that had clearly been worn by someone deeply loved. As Margaret read through the letters late into the night, tears gathering and falling before she even realized she was crying, she began to understand the life of Walter Higgins in a way the entire town, for all its gossip, never had. The letters were written to a woman named Eleanor, his wife who had died young, decades earlier, in a car accident on a rainy autumn night. The journal, written in Walter's own careful hand, revealed a grief so enormous that he had spent the rest of his life unable to speak of her, unable to move her belongings, unable to do anything but preserve her memory in silence because silence, for him, had felt safer than the risk of anyone dismissing what he had lost. He wrote of how the town had slowly grown impatient with his mourning, how people had started avoiding him, joking about him, treating his quiet devotion as strangeness rather than love. He had sealed the chest himself, the journal explained, on the 10th anniversary of Eleanor's death, unable to bear looking at her belongings any longer, yet unable to let them go either, so he welded it shut with his own hands and told himself he would open it again when the pain became bearable. It never did. He carried that grief alone for the rest of his life, misunderstood by nearly everyone around him, dismissed as odd by a town too busy to wonder what kind of sorrow could make a man disappear into himself so completely. Margaret sat with those letters until sunrise, and something in her shifted permanently. She thought about how easily people laugh at what they don't understand, how quickly a crowd dismisses a sealed, rusted, difficult thing without ever asking what might be inside it. Whether that thing is an old chest or a grieving widower or a divorced woman rebuilding her life from the wreckage of what others called failure. She decided, in that quiet apartment with the morning light beginning to spill across the letters, that Walter Higgins would not be forgotten the way he had been ignored in life. She spent the following weeks tracking down a great niece of Eleanor's living 2 states away, a woman named Priscilla Whitfield, who had never known much about her aunt's early death or the husband who mourned her so completely. When Margaret mailed the letters, the photographs, and the ring, along with a written account of everything she had learned, Priscilla called her in tears, saying that her family had wondered for years what happened to Eleanor's belongings, assuming they were lost forever. She insisted on repaying Margaret generously, but Margaret refused every offer except one. She asked only that Walter and Eleanor's letters be preserved, framed, and remembered, so that the love story, hidden in a rusted chest, would never again be reduced to a joke at an estate sale. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that broken, forgotten things often hold the most beautiful stories. Before we go, if you feel this story deep in your heart, comment the word remembered below so I know you felt it too. Margaret never spoke of the laughter that had followed her that hot Saturday afternoon. Not because it stopped mattering, but because she understood something the crowd never would, that the things people mock are often the very things holding the most love, the most grief, and the most quiet, patient hope for someone willing to look closer.